a rather nice book I read recently that has some relevance to our practice. and and I think I'll also touch on a koan in the course of it all, which is a great sort of counterpart to the koan mu. And I might just start by introducing that, because we all know this, well, many of us know this koan very well. The monk, the student asks, does a dog have Buddha nature? This thing that actually I've just been talking about, this sort of basic, intrinsic, great goodness, could I call it, at the heart of existence. Even, we might say, without existence. Does a dog participate in that? Is a dog something to do with that? You know, almost a disparaging kind of question. Even a dog, there's even a dog. And of course, many of you are probably dog lovers, and you think, well, especially a dog, not even a dog, you know. And we all have had, probably many of us, I imagine, have had special, beautiful, beautiful relationships with dogs. Maybe, I hope many of us have been blessed to have had that. You know, I certainly knew a bit of that myself as a boy. But Joshu answers mu, which means not. What an outrageous answer, dog lovers might say, you know. And actually, what an outrageous answer anybody who knows a little bit about Buddhism or Zen might also say. I mean, surely, you know, it's a point of kind of widespread knowledge, really. You know, Buddha nature, if it means anything, means something all-inclusive. You know, and in fact, in the full dialogue, it goes on. It doesn't end with mu. We treat it, you know, as a koan, it ends with mu. But there's another version of the koan where, in another book, the Book of Serenity, Book of Equanimity, where the dialogue goes on and the monk comes back and quotes scripture and says, but all living beings have Buddha nature. He quotes that and then says, so why not the dog? And Joshu responds, because it's in its karma consciousness, or in another translation, it's in delusive consciousness, or delusive consciousness is in it, or karma consciousness is in it. Different translations, but you know, all saying, well, it's got muddled up in karma consciousness, so it doesn't see its Buddha nature. It's a strange answer, because actually, you know, and when we work with this as a koan, we have to sit with, well, what is this? What is this karma consciousness thing is it separate from Buddha nature? What's that all about? So we work with that. But actually, what I want to bring in today is not that, but another time a student asks, does the dog have Buddha nature? And Joshu answers, "U," which means yes, it has. So although we do all this work with mu, the no answer, there's another answer. From Joshu's point of view, probably every bit as pertinent when he says, "U, yes, it has Buddha nature." So what does that mean? Why would we invest years, in some cases decades, sitting with his answer mu, and not even be told until years later that once upon a time Joshu gave a different answer? He said, "Ooh, the opposite, yes." Well, I don't want to get too into that right now, actually, but just to say, if we find for ourselves in direct experience what that mu is, we find that it's not just it's not, first of all, it's not just a syllable. Second of all, it's not a syllable that means no. That's not the end of it. It is both those things. But when we really sort of find this mu, it's not only those things. And when we find that, we would also find how perfectly, fully, and completely the answer u also suits, fits, expresses what mu expresses. So mu is not just mu. It's not just a little syllable. And what it is, when we find it, is also u. And, by the way, much more than just another syllable. Okay, so in other words, it's still worth working with mu. Don't worry about it. Don't think you've been misled. I mean, in a certain way, you could say we're a bit misled because it isn't in the end just about the little sound mu. We have to pretend it is. We have to give ourselves to mu as if there were nothing else to be done. And in fact, there is, in a sense, nothing else to be done. But why there's nothing else to be done is revealed when we discover that mu is not just a little syllable. Or you might put it another way, and when we discover what a little syllable actually is. Okay, so there's a little bit on that. Now, I want to say a bit about where we're at in this terrible difficulties of various kinds. I mean, of course, it sort of reminds me actually of this famous piece of London history, 1665 and 1666. There was a plague, very, very severe outbreak of the plague in London that I don't know the numbers, but killed an awful lot of people. And then the following year, there was a great fire that swept through the capital, one of the major cities on earth at the time, and killed even more people. And, we're now in this, we're in this coronavirus pandemic episode. There's still a very big deal going on in England. England actually is second only to America in the number of deaths. These two right-wing populist regimes that think it's all about personality and who cares about what your policies are, and sort of outrage, being the more outrageous you are in a way, the more careless and heedless and foolish you are, the more they like you. That Boris Johnson's somewhat in the same school. He's not, I don't think he's quite so overtly white supremacist, but he is the sort of same kind of, like me, all I really care about is that you like me, it's got a lot of that. And in that heedlessness, basically he had a sort of careless attitude to the virus. And even, the little island of England is second in the global loss of life to coronavirus, assuming that figures are correct and so on. They only just cottoned on to wearing face masks in England. Can you believe it? We just introduced it as a policy in this last few days. Anyway, in the States, what's come out of all this is, in some ways, I wonder if it could be a positive thing, that the country is being forced, it seems to me, to at least think about its endemic, is that the right word? Endemic racism. that I think I said the other night that I have been having lived here for many years and having become a citizen and everything. I'm ashamed to admit the degree of my blindness to how different racist situation is here than in Europe, and actually even in the UK. That it's just it's really it's so systemic here. It's virtually like old South Africa, an apartheid regime, a segregationist regime, and it's really I mean I think I said it the other. It's about time that somehow this country has to reckon with this, and to be a modern, super advanced, economically ahead of everybody, country like this, and to have this legacy still living on, this original sin, as the BBC is calling it, the original sin of America. And I mean, isn't it a good thing that it's topping the agenda? It's the highest priority for the country. So how do we address this? And you think, well, we're a definitely predominantly white Sangha of Zen sitters who are all, I know, very well-meaning, and a lot of people work in situations where there's social justice challenges. A lot of our Sangha are people who work for the well-being of others. They're not on the whole very selfish people in the Zen world, because the whole orientation is towards being of service and of helpfulness in the wider community and in the closer community. We're all dedicated to that to different degrees, and our practice will make us only more so. A lot of people here in this, sitting on this Zoom right now are people who are really helpful in the world and definitely don't orient in a selfish way. And so what can we do? We're sitting here, and we're privileged to be able to give time to this great project of awakening, and awakening for all beings, which is our repeated aspiration. But what are we supposed to do as a Sangha and as individuals when faced with being part of a society that is systemically racist? And does this tradition, does this practice have anything to offer, actually? And I think cautiously, without being too overconfident about it, I think the answer is yes, it does. And for different reasons, different sort of levels and different reasons. One is that we are encouraged to see reality as it is. We are actually not encouraged to put our heads in the sand and ignore things. One of the first, injunctions, no, that's too strong. The first instructions, guidances of Bernie Glassman's take on Zen, his reframing of the Zen way, is to bear witness, to see what is going on. And this is actually a sort of restatement of the first noble truth. It's not just suffering exists, but no suffering exists. Know it, see it. Don't distract yourself from it. The first step in developing a practice is to sit down and see what's going on. And, of course, a lot of that has to be internal, because we are working on ourselves. We are working on becoming better beings. I mean, becoming more helpful beings who are less distracted and who are less caught up in the three poisons that make it harder for us to be helpful. We are engaged in a process of trying to be of better help. And we're recognizing that it's not complete. That can't be complete if we're not actually doing some work on ourselves, if we're not decontaminating ourselves from the three poisons. So that is part of it. Then, as I was saying, being able to see situations as they are, bearing witness, as Bernie Glassman puts it, bearing witness, not looking away. And what then? Well, for Bernie, the next step is not knowing. In other words, not having conditioned responses, having a mind that is open to all possibilities. And from that comes the compassionate action, his third element. Now, what about Sambo Zen? Well, our position is that actually this practice is not, yes, it is about expressing the core fact of all things, all beings being one. It's about expressing that, living that fact in deeply helpful ways. But it isn't, can I say the word sort of just social work and social activism. It is those things, but it's from deep realization of our inseparability. And from our point of view, it's not, there's nothing wrong with any kind of help we can offer. Of course not. But to have a group of people across time and space, a Sangha that transcends time and space, that is devoted to this deep reality, is something of a value that can't be measured. So it's not actually, well, how can I put it? We've sort of got to have both sides. It can't just be one or the other. We are absolutely devoted in Sambo Zen to discovering and helping others discover ever more clearly this inseparability that is really the heart of who we are. And this long training we go through, having discovered that, to get it more clearly and to learn to live it more thoroughly. That is our mission. That is our purpose. And it cannot sort of, somehow it can't be irrelevant. It's so core to who we are, and it makes such a difference to how we live, to see through our sense of separation, to see it's been an illusion, and to discover our belonging in one home that is the home of all beings and that is all beings, and to live accordingly. That's our way. And, so on the one side, it's fantastic, I felt, to find an organization that's devoted to that and only that. And on the other hand, I think it's great. In other words, there are other schools of Zen and practice and so on that aren't so emphatic about the possibility of awakening for all of us, and not so clear about what that means and how to work with it. So that's part of our inheritance. Of course, I'm sort of saying all this, meaning, in a sense, take it or leave it. This is what we have to offer, and and I'm giving some sense of why I believe it's a valuable thing. But and at the same time, it's not our whole way in Sangha Zen is not just vanish up a mountain, and be enlightened. It's been a profoundly sort of grounded lay practice approach for nearly a century, and obviously it goes way back in the Zen tradition. Lots of extremely clear, enlightened lay practitioners of both genders, by the way. I mean, that's a binary statement, I'm sorry, but all genders, and in its history, and so we are, we're not, the point is to live it in lives, jobs, family, and they tend to be lives of service because we move in that direction through doing this practice, if we're not already there. And another thing in Sambo Zen is that this is true, I think, of Zen generally, is that it has a kind of a multifaceted understanding of awakening. It sees various facets of the awakening experience that you can find in other traditions, and we embrace them all. There's, as there's this real Buddhist emptiness, shunyata, Mahayana Buddhist emptiness, nothing at all-ness, gone-ness. That's our sort of could I say bedrock? It's a rockless bedrock. It's a bedrockless bedrock. It's a nothing, but it's a foundation sort of thing. That's the same as Taoist, actually, but the Taoism adds that goneness is constantly blazing forth as this moment as it is. We agree, and then there's one single pervasive mind, dream, body, what do you call it? But it's not quite the same as the true nothing, because it's actually, there is this all-pervasive fact that can be experienced as a consciousness, as a mind, it's what more religious people would call God. In the Hindu world, it's finding this non-dual awareness that's, they like to call it God or the I am. They call it. Well, we agree. This is definitely a facet, and you can see it. All these koans that we work with show these different facets. They can be tasted according to these different facets. It's beautiful. We don't really neglect any of them. I mean, we receive them. We do the best we can to acknowledge them. And so we have a maybe nicely, broad sort of understanding of awakening. Well, maybe, I don't know if it's nice, but because we're probably quite strict about certain things, like, somehow that we don't accept deep states of absorption as awakening. Oddly, considering our name, but dhyana states of deep absorption, I don't know, it's a moot point. Some of the sort of higher jhana states, maybe, but it's another matter, another day. But just being in very deep, quiet, empty absorption, that's not yet it. It has to come to this realization point. And that's what I want to now pivot to, this how realization can happen in the midst of crisis. Think of the great Roshi Blanche Hartman in San Francisco Zen Center. She had a key awakening experience in the midst of an anti-Vietnam riot in 1968, when she was shoved right up against a riot shield of a policeman in the front line of a protest. And she saw this guy's face, rage, full of rage and probably some fear, and she suddenly got it. That was her. She and this face in front of her and the whole situation around her, that was her true body. Her true body was not confined by skin. Her true body was all this situation and all the beings, even this angry person opposing her, inches from her, in the midst of that kind of intense experience and crisis. In the midst of that, it really, and in the midst of all the intense emotion of opposing an unjust, extremely cruel war, where women and children and villagers are being napalmed and all that, in the midst of, and for the wrong reasons, in the midst of all that emotion, finding it's all one. It doesn't mean that she sort of negates the opposition to the war. It means that the whole situation is actually one great heart. That's what it feels like when you get this. I mean, this oneness side is one great heart doing all this. It's a mind-blowing thing to discover, but it reorients everything in life to find this. And it's not, it doesn't require blissful, peaceful circumstances. It can happen in the midst of very difficult circumstances. It's every house. The door of every house leads to the capital city, as Joshu put it. Not even all roads lead to Rome, but open the door of any house and you're in Rome, is what Joshu says. What does he mean by the door of a house? He means all phenomena. Any moment, if you open the door to it, which basically means opening our own door, opening the door of separation. The moment is us. And you find that, and it's not a limited thing then, it's a boundless thing. You can't find it. If you find it, you find that this pen even is boundless in everything. If you find that, you don't just see it with the pen, you see it with the pen as the doorway to all. This is how Kensho works. It's one thing. Gute's little finger, Joshu's little syllable, mu or u, that opens to everything. If it opens at all, it opens totally. So the door of one little house, and you're in the whole city. Okay, that sort of thing. So in other words, okay, I think I said it. Yeah. No, not other words not needed right now. Okay, so this book that I want to dip into a little bit, and then we'll wind up soon, is called Aha. Aha, and it's about aha moments, the moments of insight that shape our world. by William Irvin. I think I quoted from him recently. He's the guy who wrote the book on the Stoics. Very good book. A Guide to the Good Life. Strongly recommended. This Aha Moments book, I thought it might be relevant because, you know, Kensho is the mother of all aha moments, right? And it's sort of partly relevant, but not entirely, because he looks at moments where he looks in religious, moral, science, mathematics, and the arts, 5 areas where aha moments happen commonly, you know. And in terms of religion, it's usually people getting a revelation from a divine being, and usually there's also some follow-up instructions that also come by way of revelation, at least in the ones that have lasted and prospered, because the divine being can't just give a revelation. The divine, or the recipient of it, if they only get a sort of revelation about the nature of things and the nature of the divine being, it's not enough. They have to get follow-up instructions on what to do about it. So, for example, in the case of Moses, you know, he gets the 10 Commandments, and kind of what's he supposed to do with them? Well, the answer comes: make an ark of acacia wood, 2.5 cubits long, 1.5 cubits wide, and 1.5 cubits high. Overlay it with pure gold both inside and out, and make a gold molding around it. So he doesn't just get, like, here's what I want you to do. He gets specific instructions on what to do next. And God tells him, make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold, and insert the poles into the rings on the sides of the ark to carry it, and so on. Or with Joseph Smith, with the Mormons, you know, having had his revelation, he gets a further one about, because he's obviously like, well, what do I do about all this? Answer: behold, verily I say unto you, let my servant George Miller and my servant Lyman White and my servant John Snyder and my servant Peter Hawes organize themselves and appoint one of them to be a president over their quorum for the purpose of building a house, and they shall form a constitution whereby they may receive stock for the building of that house, and they shall not receive less than $50 for a share of stock in that house, and they shall be permitted to receive $15,000 from any one person for stock in that house. You know, they get, God, these beings can get very specific about what you should do next. That otherwise, because otherwise you're kind of lost. You don't know how to proceed. Anyway, so that's one kind of aha moment. And actually he also, actually, no, I can't go into all of this, but so now, what about when it comes to mathematics? It's actually, in a way, apparently the most interesting kind, because typically mathematicians, serious ones, there's stories in here about, you know, a guy who had a week before his execution, another guy who had been challenged to a duel, a Frenchman in the 19th century, and the person challenging him was a crack shot, and so he knew he was going to die very likely the next morning. And what does he do all night? Mathematics. And the other guy with a week to live, mathematics. Another with a year, you know, terminal prognosis, diagnosis, nothing but mathematics. Why would they do that? Because it's it's the answer in large part because it gives them the prospect of experiencing one of the greatest delights life has to offer, a mathematical aha moment. It's to be working on a problem and get the solution. You know, it's apparently one of the most beautiful things a human being can experience in mathematics. And actually this guy, a Cambridge mathematician called Andrew Wiles, not that long ago, was the guy who finally solved this 3 centuries old problem of Fermat's last theorem. Some of you will have heard of this. It was this guy Fermat in 1687 was thinking about it's a very particular problem in math, and he got it. This theory came, this solution to this age-old mathematical problem came to him, but he didn't write it down, and he forgot it. And he wrote somewhere in the margin of some work, I've got it, but he didn't write down what it was. And so for 3 centuries, mathematicians have been trying to find it. And this guy at Cambridge, he actually did it in maybe, I don't know, within the last 30, 40 years. And he was interviewed about it. It took him 7 years. He said, when doing math, there's this great feeling. You start with a problem that just mystifies you. You can't understand it. It's so complicated. You just can't make head nor tail of it. But then when you finally resolve it, you have this incredible feeling of how beautiful it is, how it all fits together so elegantly. And then the interviewer asks for more detail regarding the aha moment itself. And speech fails Andrew Wiles. He says, I was sitting here at this desk when suddenly, totally unexpectedly, I had this incredible revelation. Pause. It was the most important moment of my working life. Pause. Nothing I ever do again will. Sorry. At this point, he turns from the camera, apparently on the verge of tears. That's what it's like. Why should mathematical aha moments be so grand? Because they are, in a sense, the purest moments of insight a person can have. Well, I think any of us who've tasted Kensho might say, well, hold on, there's that too. This unbelievable discovery. It's as if we've been working on a problem without knowing we'd been working on a problem. What problem? The problem of me. The secret, subterranean, aquifer underlying everything problem of me. How do I keep me happy? That's part of it. But what am I? You know, David Loy says, the self is intrinsically anxious because it just isn't sure it really exists. And some have said that all our efforts in life are really about trying to prove we do actually exist as a self. And somehow, in spite of all our best efforts, never quite convinced that we really do. Never quite sure. And when this Kensho moment happens, that unseen conundrum, I mean, for some of us it's not unseen, but for many it might be. We didn't know that was what we were really wrestling with. That is resolved in the most beautiful way, in the most marvelous way. And, you know, so these other kinds of aha moments, there's a very nice book actually with descriptions of them and things. They, to my mind, they're all, you know, they're all beautiful and valuable and all the rest of it in their fields, but they're also kind of a particular forms of a more general, you know, the analogues of a more general kind of actual awakening. It's not so much that we sort of have an awakening within a zone of analysis, a zone of study, a field, a discipline. No, it's much more general. We have an awakening about this very existence, meaning really this very moment, here, now, and all our sort of various kinds of work we do as meditation practitioners, of all the, you know, various sort of levels of development that we go through, different kinds of growth that we go through, you know, they're all really in support of, or ancillary to, auxiliary to the one main thing of the possibility of a total turnaround in how we experience and approach living and life and being and existing through this great, great discovery. And our whole system here, Sambo Zen and other kinds of meditation, paths of awakening, the whole thing is about that. It's to help us find that. It's not for its own sake, not for Zen's sake. Sambo Zen doesn't exist for Sambo Zen's sake. It exists for that fact, you know. And I mean, in fact, yeah, Ryoan Roshi, the abbot of Sambo Zen International, you know, I've heard him often say, often actually when we all gather, all of us teachers, he'll begin by saying, you know, just to remind you, you know, the moment we don't exist in order, as an organization, in order to help people find this great fact about who we really are, I'm going to close it down. It has no point in existing unless it's serving that purpose. And how amazing to find that, you know, you don't have to subscribe to a religion. You don't have to go and live in a monastery. You don't have to sequester yourself and not live a normal life. You don't have to not live a life like everybody else around us. This is what actually, it so happens, Tolstoy was earnestly searching for his whole life, how to have a deeply spiritual life and normal life, you know. And he was tormented, actually. In COVID time, I just reread Anna Karenina. Man, I can't recommend it. Well, I recommend it. And he, finally at the end, Levin, sort of the other main character other than Anna, he has a realization. He realizes that goodness is beautiful. He's absolutely gobsmacked by this experience, and he realizes it's actually, to diagnose it in Zen terms, it's a sort of mild kensho. I mean, it is a kensho. It's not super clear kensho, but it's enough for him. And he realizes that there's an intrinsic goodness. There's goodness. He realizes that it can't be explained by reason. He says, if goodness has causes, it's not goodness. If it has effects, a reward, it's not goodness either. Goodness is outside the chain of cause and effect. Do you see that? It's not caused. It's not a result. It's intrinsic. And that is just like this awakening that's expressing itself as everything. If it had causes, it would be conditional. It's not conditional. However, we still work hard and train hard in how to ever more effectively live what it shows us, and have that fertilize and spread through all our communities and heal them, and heal us in our blindness, and help us to, I mean, from that position, it's so much easier to bear witness, to not know, and to take compassionate action. So much more possible to follow that prescription. Okay, and you know, all we do, it's hard to believe it could be so small and simple, the way of this kind of help. Just Mu. I almost want to say, if you want to try oo, try oo. But I don't think that's orthodox practice advice. We just stick with mu, trusting that mu is truly enough. What does it take? Ask yourself, what does it take to trust that it's enough just to do mu? Okay, thank you very, very much for listening, and thank you for being here, and thank you for practicing. And please enjoy your practice, and let's all do all we can to, whatever ways we can, whatever ways present themselves to us, to make this a fairer, better, juster, kinder, more beautiful world. Okay, thank you again. And Peg, I suggest we have a little break.